The phone call from the man who had disowned his only daughter for loving another woman came like a thunderbolt in the dead of night, demanding Thea, sign the consent forms for his emergency heart surgery. Ember stood frozen beside me in our Brooklyn apartment, the woman I had built a life with after her father banished her from the family home in Chicago. Her eyes filled with the same old pain as she realized our hard-won peace was about to be ripped apart by the very crisis that could end his life. It was 2:17 a.m. when the unknown number flashed on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in Ember's posture changed the second it rang, like she already knew. "It's him," she whispered, voice barely above the hum of the radiator. I answered on speaker, and there it was, the gravelly voice of Richard Harlan, the self-made construction magnate, who once told his daughter she was dead to him the day she introduced me as her girlfriend. "Thea, I wouldn't call if I had a choice. The doctors say my heart won't last the week without this bypass. The papers need a family signature. My lawyers messed up the trust after the stroke last year. You're the only one left who can sign without dragging Ember into court. Please. I'm begging you." Ember's hand tightened on mine until her knuckles went white. 10 years had passed since that rainy afternoon in Chicago when Richard had thrown her clothes onto the lawn and changed the locks while neighbors watched. She had been 22, fresh out of college, and I had been the 20-year-old social work intern who helped her find an apartment that same night. We never looked back. Now here we were, successful in our own ways, me as a crisis counselor at a Manhattan nonprofit, Ember as a senior project manager at a green building firm. Our rings glinted under the lamp, a quiet symbol of the life we had fought to keep private. And suddenly the man who had tried to erase us needed me, the homewrecker, to save him. I didn't answer right away. My mind raced through every headline we had dodged, every holiday spent alone, every time Ember woke up from nightmares about her father's voice calling her disgusting. "Why me?" I finally asked, keeping my tone even. "Ember is still your daughter by blood." Richard's laugh turned into a cough that sounded like gravel in a drain. "Because I legally severed her rights in the will after the company lawsuit started. If she signs, the media will tear her apart, claim she's after the inheritance. You're not blood. The hospital will accept it as next of kin extension through marriage. No one has to know it's you until it's done." Ember pulled the phone away and ended the call without another word. She sank onto the couch, head in her hands. "He doesn't get to do this. Not after everything." But I could see the flicker in her eyes, the same one that appeared every time she scrolled past old family photos she thought I didn't notice. Outside, rain began tapping the windows, mirroring the storm building inside our small apartment. We had 2 hours before we had to decide whether to board the first flight to Chicago, or let the man who once called our love a sin die alone. Every second felt like a wire pulled tighter, ready to snap and take our entire future with it. By dawn we were at LaGuardia, tickets booked on my credit card because Ember's hands were still shaking too badly to type. The airport buzzed with early commuters who had no idea two women holding hands were walking into a war zone. I kept replaying Richard's words. The company lawsuit he mentioned was no secret. Harlan Construction had been splashed across Chicago news for months over a warehouse collapse that killed 2 workers. OSHA fines, wrongful death suits, the works. Richard had been driving home from a late meeting when his truck swerved on black ice, smashing into a guardrail. Internal bleeding, damaged valve, emergency surgery scheduled for noon the next day. The hospital ethics board required an impartial family signature, because Richard's living will have been contested in the same lawsuit mess. Legally, Ember was blocked. That left me. On the plane, Ember stared out the window, jaw set. If we do this, the press will find out. Someone at the hospital will leak it. Lesbian couple saves bigot father. Our jobs, our friends, everything gets dragged in. I squeezed her knee. Or we say no and live with the fact we let him die. Which ghost haunts us more? She didn't answer. The flight attendant offered coffee. Neither of us touched it. Below us the Midwest unfolded like a map of old wounds. When we landed at O'Hare, the air felt heavier, thick with the scent of jet fuel and memories. A black town car waited, sent by Richard's lawyer. The driver didn't speak. We rode in silence toward Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the city skyline rising like a challenge. The ICU smelled of antiseptic and fear. Richard lay propped in the bed, monitors beeping a steady accusation. Tubes snaked from his arms, his face gray under the fluorescent lights. When he saw us, his eyes widened, not with hate this time but with something raw and desperate. "You came," he rasped. The papers sat on the tray table, crisp and official, waiting for my signature. One stroke of the pen and the surgery could proceed. One refusal and the man who had destroyed Ember's childhood might not see tomorrow. Ember stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, every inch the woman who had rebuilt herself without him. Picked up the pen. My hand hovered. Outside the glass wall, nurses moved like shadows, and I wondered how many of them already knew the story that was about to explode across every Chicago news site by evening. The wire pulled tighter. I signed. The ink dried before I could second-guess it, and the room seemed to exhale. Richard closed his eyes, relief washing over the lines of his face like rain on concrete. "Thank you," he whispered, the first civil words he had ever spoken to me. Ember didn't move. Her silence was louder than any scream. A nurse whisked the forms away, and within minutes the surgical team was prepping. We were ushered to a private waiting room with stale coffee and plastic chairs bolted to the floor. The moment the door clicked shut, Ember turned on me. "You didn't even ask me." Her voice cracked like thin ice. "After everything he did, you just signed." I set my bag down slowly, buying time. "He would have died, Ember." I saw the scans on the tablet the doctor showed me. Aortic valve shredded. "This isn't about forgiving him. It's about not becoming the monsters he tried to make us." She paced the small room, sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. 10 years of therapy, of building a home, of learning to laugh again, and one phone call had reduced her to the scared girl on that Chicago lawn. You don't know what it's like to hear your own father say your love is a disease. To watch him change every lock, and tell the neighbors his daughter died in a car wreck. Her words hung between us, sharp as scalpels. I wanted to pull her close, but the space between us felt mined. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then Embers lit up. She glanced at the screen and went pale. "It's my Aunt Linda. How the hell does she have my new number?" She answered on speaker. Linda's voice poured out, syrupy and urgent. "Ember, honey, the hospital called the family. Your father is in surgery. We all know what happened. If you help him now, the inheritance clause might still apply. But you have to be careful. The company lawsuit is heating up. Reporters are already outside the hospital. Don't let that woman drag you into more scandal." Ember hung up without speaking. Her hands trembled. "They think we're after money. All of them." The waiting stretched into hours. We watched the clock, drank terrible coffee, and avoided each other's eyes. At one point a hospital administrator slipped in, tablet in hand. "Mrs. Harlan, the press has gotten wind. Someone leaked that Richard's estranged daughter and her partner are here. They're asking for statements." My stomach dropped. Ember stood. "Tell them nothing." But the damage was already done. By the time the surgeon emerged at 4:17 p.m. with the news that Richard had survived the bypass, phones were ringing non-stop. Social media was on fire. Someone had posted a blurry photo of us in the waiting room. Hashtags trended. Harlan lesbian drama, bigot saved by daughter-in-law. Our faces, our rings, our story twisted into clickbait within minutes. We stepped outside for air and walked straight into a wall of cameras. Microphones thrust forward like weapons. "Thea, did you sign out of guilt or greed?" "Ember, does this mean you're forgiving your father after he called you an abomination on live TV 10 years ago?" I pulled Ember behind me, shielding her the way she had shielded me the day we left Chicago. Security escorted us back inside, but the damage was spreading. My boss texted, "Clients are calling, questioning our nonprofit stance on family values." Ember's firm sent a carefully worded email about reputational risk. The wire around our lives tightened another notch. Back in the room, Richard was awake, pale but coherent. He looked at me with something almost like respect. "I owe you." Ember stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You owe us 10 years. The machines beeped on, counting the seconds until the next explosion. The next morning, the Chicago Tribune ran the headline above the fold. "Disowned lesbian daughter's wife saves construction tycoon." Below it, a photo of Ember and me leaving the hospital, my arm around her waist, her face buried in my shoulder. Richard's survival was front-page news, but our relationship was the real story. Comment sections filled with everything from death threats to marriage proposals. My phone wouldn't stop. Clients from the nonprofit pulled funding, citing controversy. Ember's boss called her directly. The investors are nervous. Green projects don't mix with scandal. Take a leave. We sat in the hospital cafeteria, untouched sandwiches between us, while outside protesters gathered, some holding signs that read "God hates" and others "Love wins." Every choice we had made now carried a price tag measured in lost jobs, lost privacy, lost peace. Richard asked to see us alone. The nurses wheeled his bed up slightly, and he looked smaller than I remembered, the powerful man reduced to paper gown and bruises. "I watched the news," he said quietly. "I know what this is costing you." Ember remained standing, refusing the chair I offered. "You have no idea what it costs." He nodded slowly, as if the movement hurt. "The lawsuit against the company. It's worse than I let on. The warehouse collapse wasn't just bad luck. I cut corners on safety to meet deadlines. 2 men died. Their families are suing for everything. If I die, the suits go after the estate. If I live, I can settle. But the board wants me out unless the family stands united." His eyes met mine. "That's why I needed you to sign. Ember was legally removed, but you're still family in the eyes of the trust one wrote before I lost my mind." The confession hung heavy. Ember's face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. "You used us to save your empire." Richard didn't deny it. "I was desperate. But seeing you two together, it reminded me of what I threw away." For the first time in a decade, he looked at his daughter without disgust. "I was wrong, Ember. About you. About Thea. About a lot of things." The words should have been healing. Instead, they felt like another trap. Outside, the window cameras flashed as more reporters arrived. My own mother called from New York, voice shaking. "Honey, people at church are praying for you but also saying you're enabling sin. Your job is at risk." Ember's phone buzzed with a text from her cousin. "Aunt Linda says if you take any money, the family will contest the will. Walk away now." We left the room to talk in the hallway. "He'll dangle forgiveness like a carrot," Ember said, voice low. "Then yank it when the lawsuit ends." I leaned against the wall, exhausted. Or maybe this is real. People change when death stares them down. She laughed bitterly. "He changed the locks, not his heart." Yet I saw the crack in her armor, the little girl who still wanted her father to love her. That night we checked into a nearby hotel under fake names, but someone recognized us in the lobby. By morning our room number was trending. We ordered room service and ate in silence while the TV played footage of protesters clashing with counter-protesters outside the hospital. Every decision now felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon. Sign the next set of release forms for Richard's recovery care, and risk being painted as gold diggers. Refuse and watch him suffer complications that could still kill him. Protect our jobs or protect the man who once tried to erase us. The wire sang with tension. 3 days later, Richard was moved to a private room, and the real negotiations began. His lawyers arrived with briefcases and NDAs. "If you both sign these statements supporting the company in the lawsuit, the board will drop any threat of firing Ember from future contracts." Ember read the documents, her face hardening. "This is a gag order. We can't speak about the past. About what he did to me." The lead attorney shrugged. "Public image is everything right now. The families of the dead workers are using your story against us." Even his own daughter wouldn't stand by him until his lesbian wife forced his hand. "It's killing our stock." I watched Ember's hands clench the papers until they creased. This was the choice. Silence our truth to save his empire, or speak and watch everything crumble. That afternoon we met the families of the 2 men who died in the collapse. They had requested a meeting through the hospital chaplain. In a small conference room, the widows sat across from us, eyes red but steady. One of them, Maria, spoke first. "Your father cut every safety corner. My husband begged for better harnesses. Now he's gone and your family is using your love story to look compassionate." Ember's voice was soft but steady. "We didn't know the full extent. We're not here to defend him." The other widow leaned forward. "Then help us. Tell the truth. Don't let him buy your silence with surgery and pretty words." The room felt smaller. If we spoke out, Richard could lose everything, including the medical care that still depended on his company's insurance. If we stayed quiet, two families never got justice. My phone vibrated with another message from my boss. Board meeting tomorrow. Your involvement is hurting donations. We may need to let you go. Back at the hotel, Ember and I argued for the first time in years. I can't keep protecting him, she said, pacing. Every time I look at you, I see the life we almost lost because of people like him. I stood my ground. And if we destroy him now, the media will say the lesbian couple finished what the lawsuit started. They'll never stop coming for us. Tears finally broke through her anger. I hate that loving you still costs this much. I pulled her into my arms, and for a long moment the outside world disappeared. We were just two women who had chosen each other against the world. But the world was winning. That night we lay awake listening to the city, knowing tomorrow's decision could end our careers, our anonymity, or our relationship. The next morning Richard called us to his room. He looked stronger, color returning to his cheeks. I heard about the widows. I can't change the past, but I can change the future. I'm settling the lawsuit for everything the company has. No more fighting. And I'm rewriting the will. You both get equal shares. No strings. Ember stared at him. Why now? He met her eyes. Because lying in that bed I realized the only thing that mattered when I thought I was dying was that my daughter was happy. And she is. With you. For the first time in 10 years Ember cried in front of him. I signed the new paperwork as witness. Outside, the protesters had dwindled, replaced by supporters holding rainbow flags. But the board of Harlan Construction was already leaking stories that Ember had blackmailed her father for inheritance. The wire pulled so tight it hummed. The settlement made national news. Richard's face appeared on every screen, announcing he was stepping down and donating millions to workplace safety. He publicly apologized to the widows on camera, voice breaking. Then he looked straight into the lens and said the words that changed everything. I also owe an apology to my daughter Ember and her wife Thea. 10 years ago I chose hate over love. Today I choose family. The clip went viral. Our phones exploded with messages from strangers offering support, from old classmates apologizing, from distant relatives suddenly remembering our names. But not everyone celebrated. My nonprofit board voted to restructure my position, citing donor loss. Ember's firm placed her on indefinite leave pending internal review. We sat in Richard's hospital room watching the coverage, the three of us in the same space for the first time since the disownment. Richard reached for Ember's hand. She let him take it. I don't expect you to forgive overnight, he said. But I'm selling the house in Chicago, moving closer to New York if you'll have me in your lives. The offer hung there, fragile as new ice. I watched Ember's face, the war inside her visible in every micro-expression. Outside the window a small crowd had gathered again, this time with signs that read "Love Heals" and "Second Chances." But my email inbox contained threats from anonymous accounts. You ruined a good man. Ember's cousin posted on Facebook that we had manipulated a dying man for money. The pressure never stopped. Every interview request, every lawyer meeting, every decision about whether to speak publicly tested us. One night after Richard fell asleep we walked the hospital garden. Snow had begun to fall, soft and quiet. If we let him back in, Ember said, we risk losing the boundaries we fought so hard for. I stopped under a lamppost, snow catching in her auburn hair. If we shut him out completely, we become the people who refused mercy when it was asked. I don't want to carry that. She pulled me close, forehead against mine. You're the reason I can even consider this. You signed those papers when I couldn't. In that moment the world felt smaller. Just the two of us in the falling snow. But the next morning brought fresh crisis. The widow's lawyer filed an amendment to the settlement, demanding Richard testify in open court about the safety cuts. If he did, the media circus would return full force. If he refused, the families might reopen the case against us for interfering. Richard looked at us from his bed. I will testify. The truth has to come out, even if it costs me everything again. The decision was no longer his alone. It was ours. The courtroom was packed the day Richard took the stand. Ember and I sat in the front row, hands clasped so tightly our rings pressed into skin. He told the whole story. The cost-cutting, the ignored warnings, the shame that followed. Then he looked at us. I lost my daughter because I was afraid of what people would think. I won't lose her again. The judge accepted the amended settlement. The widows received justice. Outside on the courthouse steps, cameras flashed as Richard, still using a cane, stood between us. "This is my family," he said simply. The image ran on every network. Back in New York, our jobs were waiting with apologies and new contracts. The threats faded. Life slowly returned to a new normal. 6 months later, we hosted Thanksgiving in our Brooklyn apartment. Richard carved the turkey with steady hands, laughing at Ember's terrible jokes. The man who once threw her out now passed her the stuffing with pride. But scars remained. Some nights Ember still woke from nightmares. Some mornings I still checked the news for old headlines. Forgiveness wasn't a finish line. It was daily work. Richard never asked for more than we could give. He sold the Chicago house, bought a small condo nearby, and started volunteering at the same safety nonprofit that had nearly fired me. The company rebranded under new leadership. The world moved on. One quiet evening on our rooftop, Ember turned to me, city lights glittering behind her. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing?" I pulled her close, the same way I had the night I signed those papers. "Every day. But I'd rather wonder with you than live without the chance." Below us the city hummed, indifferent to the battles won in silence. Richard had survived. We had survived. Love had survived. True or false? The real courage wasn't signing the papers to save a life, but choosing to protect the love that made that choice possible, even when the entire world demanded we choose differently.